All right, chat, we're going to watch a video from Josh Strife Hayes. I haven't watched one of his videos in many, many months. And this is a bit of an older video of his, but somebody brought it to my attention on why old MMOs feel better. I'm kind of curious as to whether or not his opinion is the same as mine. I'll go out and I'll go and say that right now. I like older MMOs because it seems to be a lot more community interaction within the game. Whereas a lot of current MMOs, and I'll use Retail WoW as a perfect example, is they give you a lot of options to be able to not rely on other players in the game to actually play the game, which some people might like. But I like it when you have to interact with other people, and I just think it makes for a better experience personally. Retail WoW seems to be more about, allowing people the opportunity to not really have to get to know anyone. You can just LFR, jump into a raid with people that you don't know and that you'll never raid with again, and do a raid and get out, and next week rinse and repeat. Of course, there are guilds out there and stuff like that, but you don't necessarily need to actually interact with other people to really play the game. So anyways, let's watch his why old MMOs feel better. Oh, this is EverQuest.
About the days gone when MMOs.
Hold on, start from the beginning.
Many long-time MMO players fondly reminisce about the days gone when MMOs were far less optimized than they are now, when the games were more of a struggle to play. The old guard complains about today's modern MMO conveniences like tutorials, fast travel, quest markers, minimaps, group finders, and the lack of need to communicate. Many say MMOs have lost the social soul they had so long ago.
That's
and
what I was
simply aren't
talking
as
about.
memorable. However, many of the modern advancements people blame were added as a result of players directly asking for them. Is it possible to design a game to be worse, and yet in doing so actually make the player's long-term experience of it better? Can giving the player a less optimized, less immediately fun experience actually result in them remembering the game more fondly, and indeed even recommending it to players precisely because of the fact it is less optimized? The answer is both yes and no. It's a paradox of adversity within game design, and it's one of the main reasons modern MMOs feel the
Guild
way
Wars
they do.
2 is one of my favorite games of all time.
It's trying to get at when they said, you think you do, but you don't. So let's discuss the actual psychology behind it. As usual, a massive thank you to all the supporters on Patreon and Twitch who keep the channel going. More information on how you can support at the end. For now, let's begin. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm Josh Strife Hayes. I've been making videos.
How much do you think he spends on coffee mugs or tea mugs, like in a month?
About MMORPG design for years, and one thing that I hear repeatedly from both old players who played the game back in the day and new players who are just discovering them is that older MMOs were better. Now, better is a very subjective word. It's hard to define, it's different for everyone. But with so many old games still online, like the original EverQuest, or classic versions of modern games being released, like World of Warcraft Classic.
The original Ultima Online, which even predates EverQuest, is still online.
Or old school RuneScape, there must be some element of design, some choice, beyond just nostalgia, some reason people keep going back to old.
Whenever I talk to people about old MMOs, or we reminisce about old MMOs that we played back in the day, people come to my channel all the time and we reminisce about these old games. It all revolves around one thing, and it's the community and how much you had, how much fun you had playing with other people. Like, nobody's talking about how much they enjoyed being a lumberjack in Ultima Online. You talk about all these, these group things that you did back in Ultima Online, and all these fun things that you were able to do with other people, and the friendships that you made in those games. That's, I think, honestly, what makes those games so fun. Like, Ultima Online's a perfect example where you'd sit up all night training certain skills and abilities with other people in your group of friends or your guild or whatnot. And you would sit up all night just doing the same thing over and over again, but you'd be sitting in like a voice communication program. Back then it was Roger Wilco. And you just sit there and talk about whatever. And, this is the basis of how a lot of good friendships are made. Whereas a lot of games today, you don't need to talk to people at all. You just play it single, and there's not really any sort of I don't know. There's not any sort of memories that are developed out of that. Like, sure, you might have gotten a good weapon or something like that, but when you're in a raid with a bunch of people that you don't know, and you're not going to raid with them the next week because you're just in a random raid finder, it's not as memorable when you kill a certain boss as it is when you do it with a whole bunch of friends that you've been doing these attempts at for weeks on and weeks off, for every week rather. Now you've got games where you're just, in a random raid with random people, or you're in a random GDKP with people that you'll never play with again, and that's why it's not nearly as memorable.
Older designed games. Over the years, I've tried to make videos explaining MMO design, breaking down design elements, comparing choices. I've covered the idea of the meta, the chosen one narrative trope, fast travel, endgame, abundance of MMOs themselves, microtransactions, graphics, level scaling, but now I think I've managed to distill it down to the simplest, most base reason. I'm going to call it the paradox of adversity within game design. It's not the catchiest title, I know, but it explains why making something better for the player in the short term can sometimes remove its ability to have a long-term impact. It's all to do with the human experience of overcoming adversity. Consider the following. If something, say a task or a challenge, is immediately easy, it will have a high number of people attempt it and complete it, because it's accessible to a greater number of people. And because a great number of people tend to enjoy easier things, the task will see a relatively high retention rate. You could consider things like sitting on the sofa binge watching a TV show, or ordering a takeaway, getting dressed in whatever was lying on the floor, calling off a planned meeting because it's raining and you don't want to go. It's low effort, but immediate reward. On the opposite end of the spectrum are very hard tasks with very high rates of immediate failure, or a great deal of input effort required. Fewer people will even attempt it, let alone succeed. And because people don't enjoy failure, many will quit if the first few attempts don't succeed. This could be leaving the sofa to go to a gym, applying for a much harder job than you've currently got, cooking a full 3-course meal from scratch, dressing up in smart or complex clothes, or attending a meeting if the circumstances are against you and you don't want to go. It could be learning a language or training for a difficult sports event such as a triathlon. It's very high effort with a very delayed reward. The paradox is the immediate reward for the low effort input is never as high or as satisfying as the delayed reward for the high input process. The intensity of the reward and the long-term value of it is directly related to the complexity and difficulty to achieve the process. Put simply, if something is easy to do, you'll feel good in the process but not care about the reward in the long term.
It won't be memorable.
You won't even create a memory of either the process or the reward because it's nothing special. But if something is difficult to do, you'll likely dislike the process.
So if you play a game, I don't know, whatever game it is, and it only takes you like a few hours to complete or whatever, and it's really not that difficult of a game, you won't remember that game for being a fantastic game. But you'll probably go through the process of actually completing it because it's so easy. Whereas other games like, I don't know, we'll just keep using World of Warcraft as an example, where some of the raids can get pretty difficult. A lot of people will never complete certain raids, like Nax 40 or something like that. A lot of people never completed it because they just kind of got burnt out and they just didn't feel like putting in the effort to actually do it. I have no doubt anyone could have done it, but for a lot of people, it was a long process to get a character geared all the way up. And I'll use Nax or raiding in WoW as a perfect example. Back when Vanilla first launched, I'm talking way back in 2004, I didn't raid at all. Like, I was like, okay, this is a nuisance. Like, why do I have to raid in order to PvP? I didn't want to put in the effort. So I didn't feel the reward. I didn't feel like the reward was worth it. But over the course of a few expansions, I was really disappointed with the fact that I never got to experience any of that stuff. So when they announced Vanilla, I wanted to put myself through all of the raiding and stuff like that to be able to actually say that I'd done it. Now, in original Vanilla, I'd actually cleared Molten Core, which is no big deal. But I remember the first time I cleared Blackwing Lair in Classic, I was excited as hell because I'd never done it before. And then same as AQ40, when I saw Cthulhu, there was actually a video clip where you have to hide around so you don't aggro Cthulhu. And I was tilting my camera so I could actually see him because I'd never seen Cthulhu in person before. And then same thing with Nax 40. I remember the first time we finished Nax 40 with my guild in vanilla, I was like ecstatic because it was something that it was a long time goal of mine to be able to actually say that I've done these raids. And I finally had the opportunity to put all this effort in. And when I was able to finally complete it, the reward, the sense of satisfaction was way higher than a lot of these games where, you do something, it's super easy, but the reward just doesn't feel like it's as great.
Process of doing it.
He's spinning not just about MMOs, but literally life more generally. True.
But then the long-term reward of having done it will have more intrinsic value to you, and the memory you create will be much more intense. This is human nature. We want the easy and immediate, but we place much more long-term value on the completion of difficulty. Nobody wants to struggle, but everyone wants the feeling and satisfaction earned from struggling and succeeding. We don't enjoy the process of overcoming adversity, but we do grow from it. Indeed, the moments of unplanned struggle often become some of our fondest memories. It's very important to understand that the word struggle in this context is not life-changing trauma. It's not extremely negative experiences that you wish you could remove. It means less than optimal, unexpected. It means more difficult than you originally anticipated. It's not extremely damaging, it's challenging within the context of the game. If you go camping with your friends and everything is absolutely fine, you'll likely have an okay trip, but if on the second night it begins to absolutely pour with rain and you discover there's a rip in the tent, you will likely hate it in the moment, but look back on it fondly, laughing with the group as you all reminisce the struggle you overcame. It's often the moments of struggle that we look back on and smile about. We defeated the enemy and we see value in that. If you ask older MMO players some of their best memories, they'll often tell you about all the adversity they overcame, standing selling items in the EverQuest tunnel or the Alodar bank, completing quests without guides, phoning friends in real life to organize a raid. There exists in design a Goldilocks zone of player difficulty, where something is not too easy and not too hard, it's just right. You're not going to frustrate the player and prevent them from finishing the game, but when they do finish the game, they're going to feel an immense satisfaction that they have overcome a perfectly balanced challenge. So how does this all relate back to MMORPGs? Well, remember when Blizzard told you think you do, but...
See, I think this is probably what he's getting to next. I think this is one thing that vanilla World of Warcraft got right, is that the game itself, everybody knows that raiding in original vanilla was not difficult, but it was fun. It was fun to get through all of that, all of the raids and all the bosses and stuff like that. And back in the day, like when vanilla first came out, before people became really good players, raids like BWO were considered pretty challenging. In fact, the second boss, I can't remember the name of it right now, was considered a guild killer. The second boss in BWL broke up Vale. Yes, Vale was a boss that was considered a guild killer back in original classic. It's by today's standards, it's super easy, but guilds that were able to get past that, it was like considered an extremely massive achievement. Now, obviously, people that played in Classic just a few years ago, most guilds got past Vale super easy, so it's not very difficult at all by today's standards. But it was just difficult enough that it would cause a bit of a challenge, but a lot of people would get past it and feel good about themselves to be able to continue on and enjoy the game.
And by the way,
but there's some bosses that just cause so much frustration. And I'll use Moru in TBC as a boss that some guilds, that was the guild killer in TBC, was Moru. And a lot of guilds they just died at that boss. They could not get any further. And a lot of people just didn't have any fun. But for those of us that actually got past Moru, but when you finally did, it was an immense amount of satisfaction that you actually got past this boss. But to some people, it was just too much. Like they'd spend 2, 3, 6 weeks on this boss and still not be able to get past it. So
you don't want to do that. either. You think you do, but you don't. Remember when you had to like spam cities and say, need a tank, need a tank, need a tank?
This Jalen Brack will always be known for this, for just this. Like, that's all he's ever going to be known for. And maybe announcing Classic. Being the guy that actually announced Classic as well and poking a little bit of fun out of himself while he was doing it.
During the Burning Crusade days, you don't remember that because now you just push a button that says go to the dungeon. You don't want to do that.
Here's what they actually meant. It's two elements of human psychology combining. The abundance of choice, meaning we don't stick at one thing when it gets challenging and can easily switch, and the value we gain from overcoming a challenge. Many years ago, there weren't as many MMOs, so you have a relatively captured audience. If you didn't like one game, you could go to another, but you'd very quickly cycle through all possible games. The player base didn't have great variety, and a lot of these MMOs were difficult. The players would face adversity in all games, such as no group finders, meaning you had to talk to people, and creating a group could take a while. No quest markers on the minimap, or minimaps themselves, or even in your journal, so you had to write down NPCs' names and locations. No market boards or global trading systems, so it was player-to-player trade only. No tutorial, meaning you were placed directly into the world and you relied on the community to help you, and many games came on physical CDs and took hours to install, with the process often going wrong. This isn't the game itself, but it's still
World of
part
Warcraft
of an
took a long
adversity
time to
experience.
install.
Adversity means a difficult or unpleasant situation, and overcoming it is a good feeling. Now, the adversity in a game doesn't just need to be the boss design or the gameplay. It can be the meta elements, such as having to play a game without a guide, being unable to switch servers and play with your friends, corpse runs, experience debt, almost cryptic levels of description for both quest guides and item descriptions. Older games had a lot of adversity within them. And as we know, while people like the sense of accomplishment which comes with overcoming adversity, they don't always like adversity in the moment. People quit difficult things while they're still in the difficult bit. With older MMOs, this wasn't a major problem for player retention because the players simply didn't have many other places to go. The end result was a hemmed-in player base with a sparse selection of MMOs, all of which had heavy amounts of adversity, and your choice was overcome it or stop playing. And if you stopped playing, then you simply stopped caring. And if you did overcome it, you felt intense personal pride. But as more MMOs were made and player choice increased, the designers saw both opportunities and issues. If they made the player face too much adversity, the players wouldn't push on because they had no other choice. They would leave because now they did have choice. And this put designers into a strange position.
Actually,
they needed to make the systems the players would experience immediately very easy to prevent the players leaving, but in doing so, they were reducing the potential long-term connection the player would have to that system because no one remembers the easy accomplishments. Take the group finder. Without it, players are forced to talk and communicate and connect. Bonds will form, friendships, rivalries. You have to time your gameplay sessions to your guild. The act of forming the group becomes a satisfying ritual itself, and when the group is formed, it will likely stick together because the process of forming another is difficult. The process of forming the group is the adversity, and the feeling of having formed one is now substantial. But then the group finder comes in to remove the adversity of forming
forms a group
the group,
for
and
you.
in doing so also removes the feeling of reward of forming it. It's positive for players with very little time, but negative for players who value the process of making the group. The lack of quest markers on your minimap, or indeed the lack of a detailed map at all, or the lack of fast travel, means you now faced adversity of talking to every NPC, finding a quest, memorizing the world, learning the lay of the land, or becoming friends with a class who could teleport you around. The act of exploring and progressing was the adversity. That was the challenge. It wasn't easy, but for those who could do it, it was fulfilling. Then the minimaps, teleport spells, fast travel, and icons and quest helpers and auto run came along because players were leaving the game before even finding the quests due to the difficulty of the process, and it had to be made easier to increase player retention, or the players would leave for a game which was doing it. Again, in doing so, you are removing the adversity of learning the land at the expense of the player's long-term connection to the land. Most players simply don't have a very long attention span, or a great deal of patience to deal with failure or time-consuming systems, so game designers needed to remove any and all roadblocks to failure, and this became a double-edged sword because they were now taking the process of adversity and resulting satisfaction and replacing it with a mundane, easy process and no emotional reward. This paradox of adversity can be applied to lots of MMORPG design elements. There used to be fewer MMOs, so players...
I feel like what he's talking about, it's one of the reasons why a lot of these games that are like new games that are out today, they're so underwhelming because they've made a lot of the, I don't know, they've made a lot of these systems so mundane and boring, like so easy to do. For example, daily quests and stuff like that in WoW. It's just like, you know, it's so easy to do, but there's not the sense of reward just isn't there as much as some of the other things that we used to have to do in game in order to make money or in order to, you know, finish a task or something like that. It just seems a lot of the things that they've added to the game are just kind of mundane, and there's not really anything to that interests you. Like, I don't know anyone that actually likes doing dailies in World of Warcraft. I know there are people that do it because they get some reward at the end. Like I don't know, maybe they get a mount or whatever it is. That's their sense of reward once they get a certain amount of rep or something. But generally, a lot of these systems that they put into games these days are just kind of boring.
Had less choice, meaning you could make your game more difficult. You could add in more adversity, whether that's the difficulty of the enemies, the quests, or even understanding the systems the game is made up of. Players would have to conquer them and so be given the reward for conquering them. Ironically now, if something is too difficult...
Another example is when Blizzard nerfs raids. Like, remember when they started nerfing raids back in like TBC and stuff like that, and people were freaking out? They're like, no, it's too early, don't nerf them. There's a lot of people that were like, no, we don't want them nerfed. And then there are other people that were like, no, we're tired of wiping on this boss over and over again. And they just wanted to be able to say that they completed the boss. But it's a big deal to a lot of raiders to be able to say that you completed certain raids like pre-nerf. So it's actually a big deal. It's a sense of accomplishment like he's talking about.
Difficult, players will leave and go to another MMO because there is so much choice. It is incredibly ironic that the design which sets up satisfaction, adversity, is...
Is there really a lot of choice in MMOs though? Like, like I know you've got World of Warcraft and you've got like one or two others, but are really that many people going to other MMOs other than the top, 3 or 4 that are really out there? A lot of these like Korean MMOs that are out there, are those really looked at as options to people? I feel like a lot of people that are playing World of Warcraft or, one of the other top 2 or 3 games that are out there, I don't think that they're still looking at there being a lot of options. I think what a lot of people are doing is they're looking at games like Ashes of Creation or, some people consider Pantheon to be another game that could be coming out. I think that game's never coming out, but they're looking at other games in the future. I don't know that there's too many games that are out there right now that people are looking at going, hey, look at this on my timeline, New World. Like, if you're not having fun in World of Warcraft right now, are you really looking at New World as an option to go and play? Maybe not, because, New World's still basically in beta.
Also the design which drives players away. In short, if you fill your MMO with player adversity, systems which the player must overcome, it will feel incredibly satisfying when a player advances through it, but it is also far more likely the average player will quit before reaching that satisfaction, because the process is difficult.
It's quite a dilemma that these developers have.
It is now much more likely that players will stick around and finish your game, but also they will feel very little connection to it because they never had to overcome adversity to get there. Difficult experience means less immediate fun, but a stronger long-term appreciation of it. An easy experience means more...
You know what? Maybe Diablo 3 is an example I'll use. Diablo 3 I played, I got through like the lowest, the lowest difficulty level of the game, got straight through to the end boss, And then they basically start you over from scratch, and you have to go through all the levels again on a harder difficulty, basically. And I got through the first one really super easy, but I didn't really feel a sense of accomplishment when I did that. Like I certainly didn't want to play the game again. I was like, oh, okay, I got through it. I forced myself to get through this, although it didn't take very long. It wasn't that difficult. But I certainly wasn't looking at the game going, okay, now I want to play it again and try it on slightly harder difficulty, because I didn't have that big of a sense of accomplishment when I did that. However, with like World of Warcraft or other games where I'm raiding and stuff like that, when we finally kill the last boss in a certain raid, you feel this big sense of accomplishment. And it's like, okay, good, we've done that. That was exciting. Like all this work that we put in have finally paid off, and you kind of want to keep going. If the raids were all dull and boring, you can argue whether they are or not, but if they're all dull and boring and everyone was getting through them relatively easy, I personally think that I'd quit playing the game, because I couldn't imagine wasting 2 days of a week or whatever raiding really super boring content. You quit the game the same way? That's why I quit Diablo. I don't know if Diablo 4 will be any better. I don't have any intention of trying it at this moment, but
immediate fun, but a weaker long-term appreciation of it. You only need to
that's
look
what I
at
just
the
said about Diablo
modern-day
2.
video game difficulty mythos to see how we as players value overcoming adversity. The Pandaren who leveled to maximum without leaving the starting zone. Swamp.
Do you imagine like doing that? Like just to have a bigger sense of you know what is a perfect example is the hardcore challenge in World of Warcraft. Like when you get to 60 with a hardcore challenge, you have a much bigger sense of like accomplishment than just leveling it any other way. Like having to actually delete your character if you die through the leveling process in hardcore World of Warcraft, the sense of accomplishment that you get when you actually get to level 60 is amazing. And when you watch things like the Road to Ragnaros, where they actually had a bunch of these hardcore players who got to 60, they, without dying, they did all their pre-bis, they went and got all their pre-bis through level 60 dungeons without dying, and then they actually raided through Molten Core, and now they've done BWL as well. And they've done this all without dying. Like, that is a massive sense of accomplishment. And that's why when I talk to people about me playing the hardcore character, I'm actually tempted to actually go and start over again on the Alliance side, because I would like to... I've already gotten to 60 on a character before. Like, I don't think it's that hard, because I'm ultra safe, basically. But I would like to have that, like, that feeling of trying to raid and not die on a hardcore character and actually get through the final boss. You know, it kind of brings me back to maybe when I played Dungeons and Dragons, like pen and paper Dungeons and Dragons, right? And the one thing that's really kind of odd about MMOs is the fact that you go into an instance, you go into a raid, and you kill a boss, you kill all the bosses or whatever, and then you come out and the raid eventually resets, and then you go in and do it again. But it's like, you've already killed this boss. Why is he still in the game? Like, why am I still able to actually do this, right? It's kind of weird. So the hardcore challenge where you're only allowed to do an instance once, it's kind of neat. But they put in these rules to make, to give you a massive sense of accomplishment if you can actually get past this. And tens of thousands of people are playing this way. It's so much harder to play this way than playing the normal way. And it just goes to show that there's a lot of people that really enjoy having these obstacles put in their way, and the sense of accomplishment that they know they'll get when they actually finally do get to level 60. Some people have done it multiple times. 10 times some people have done it. Most people have never been able to get past, like level 30. In fact, the average death is apparently between level 12 and 14. Like somewhere in that range is where the average person dies. So to actually get to 60 without dying is a major sense of accomplishment. And then you keep going and see how far you can go. So
Athletics taking on the Theatre of Blood while locked entirely inside Mauritania. Let me solo her, killing Melania where
After 20, usually I think Blizz will put in a hardcore mode. Tune in on Saturday, Conic. There's going to be a major announcement about that, so tune in on Saturday.
wearing only a pot on his head. The Happy Hop performing no-hit runs of the Soulsborne games, sometimes consecutively.
No-hit runs. That's how No-Hit Jerome got his name, if you guys didn't already know that. Is he played video games and his challenge was to not get hit in them. And I don't know if he'd done this in World of Warcraft before, but I know from talking to him, he used to do this in other games, try and not get hit.
Rendy achieving the level 3 Fire Cape in old school RuneScape, finishing the Mario games without collecting any coins. We value and respect those who overcome adversity in games, and if that player is us, we end up valuing and respecting ourselves. So the reason many players have fond memories of older MMOs and will tell new players that older games are better is because they contained a lot more adversity, and playing them demanded you overcome it, giving you as a player that deep sense of satisfaction which comes with doing that. They may not be fun in the moment, but they are infinitely more satisfying to look back on. Modern day MMORPGs have removed as much adversity as they can because that improves the early to mid-game experience. The irony, of course, is you will retain more players, but you won't be generating those very human, very intense, very memorable experiences that come with overcoming
This is very true.
an adverse system. It's why killing a boss after 100 attempts feels better than killing the boss after 1 attempt. You have achieved something difficult. The irony, of course...
What felt better, Max, when we killed Muru on, I don't know what attempt that we finally did it on, killing Muru finally for that first time, or basically one-shotting everything in Nax 25. Like, we just smashed through Nax 25, and I remember when we went into Nax 25, the opening day, like, I was like, I'd done Nax 40, and that was challenging. So I had never done Nax 25 before. For those of you that are watching this on YouTube, Nax 40 is from Vanilla World of Warcraft. Nax 25 is from Wrathful Lich King, which is a much easier nerfed version of the same instance. And I remember going into Nax 25, and we were just smashing through the first set of mobs. I was like, this is nuts how easy this is. Like, we were basically just chewing through everything. And then we went to the first boss. I think we did Patchwork, the first boss, which in Nax 40 is a little bit challenging the first time you do it. Nax 25, we just kicked the crap out of it and moved on. And it was like, wow, this is like super easy. So I've done both Nax 40 and Nax 25. Nax 25, I felt no sense of accomplishment. Although we got through it super fast. We were one of the first guilds on the server to get through it. But Nax 40, the guild that I was in at the time was certainly not one of the first guilds to get it done. I believe we did it our first day. I'd have to check. Maybe we did it our second day. In fact, I'm pretty sure it was on our second raid day that week that we actually cleared. But the sense of accomplishment was way higher because it was so much more challenging and so much more fun. Whereas when we cleared Nax 25, we got through all the bosses, and at the end there was barely a cheer at the end, type of thing. So, whereas I'll use current day Wrath, we just did Yogg 0. First time that we'd ever actually tried to do Yogg 0, and we managed to kill it on Wednesday, so yesterday. Well, now it's Friday officially. But we actually got Yogg 0, and everybody in Discord was cheering, like, yeah, we got, because it was a lot more challenging than other bosses that were in there. And there's other bosses that are in the current raid as well, so that were also challenging. We didn't get it on the first attempt, and when we finally did get it down, it was way more of an adrenaline rush and way more excitement than anything that was just an easy pushover. So I don't know why people wouldn't want to challenge themselves after feeling all that sense of excitement and stuff like that when they finally do get these bosses down. I don't know why people would just be okay with playing a very simple game to get, get through it super easy. I personally would think that a lot of, maybe it's just the type of people that are, raiding in decent guilds that look for more of a challenge. Because I think that if you went into a new MMO and the first raid was super boring, I would like to think that the retention rate would be really low. Like they'd be like, no, that was too easy. That was boring. I'm going to go play something that's more challenging.
Course is that most players won't stick around for 100 attempts. They will declare it too difficult and move on to a different
Boss
game.
or guild killers
Many
like
players
Muru.
ask for easy routes to be added because they focus on the gameplay experience of right now more than the long-term experience and satisfaction gained by conquering a challenge. The skill in games design is to find that Goldilocks zone, where a game is challenging and rewarding while not being frustrating to the point of making a player quit. Older MMOs had much less competition. Players couldn't just leave for another game at a moment's notice, and even if they did, it would be just as difficult. So that Goldilocks zone was much broader for older MMOs. When Blizzard said, "You think you do, but you don't," what they meant was they believed a modern-day MMO player base would quit classic WoW due to the adversity in the game's design, the lack of group finder and the lack of quest giver's location on the minimap.
A lot of people did.
Before they were able to
a lot of people were dead set against Classic. Like you have to remember back when Classic was first proposed, or a lot of people were asking for it. There was a lot of like modern day gamers who had no interest in it, and they had nothing but bad things to say about the idea of it even coming out. I could play you, I don't know how many clips of Trade Chat or whatever the hell her name is. There's other people I'm sure that you can mention. Cowley is one who they were not supportive of Classic. Like they were like, oh, I don't see the point of it, blah blah blah. We've already done all this stuff. I don't, they weren't very supportive of the idea of Classic coming out. Whereas other people, myself, we understood why Classic was so fun to play and why we wanted to play it again. It wasn't just nostalgia. We knew it was a fun version of the game. Like there was private servers and stuff out there. I didn't need Blizzard to come out with Classic. I had private servers I could play on. And it wasn't nostalgia that drove people to play on these private servers over and over and over again when, it wasn't even Nostalgia Reset was the first World of Warcraft private server. It was just the best of them in kind of a new era of private servers for World of Warcraft. But, you would play these private servers that go through its cycle, and then a new one would pop up and everyone would jump on that. If it was just nostalgia, people would play it once and then be like, okay, that's it, I'm not doing it again. It's not nostalgia, it's a great game, and people enjoy the way you interact, or you have to interact with people, and you're not just raid logging, you're actually out in the world doing stuff and having to interact with other people and building these friendships. And now, just a few years later, people are calling for it again. Like, people had so much fun in Classic World of Warcraft that they're now asking for a fresh relaunch of Classic World of Warcraft so that we can do it all over again. It's not just nostalgia, it's actually a really fun game.
Reach the satisfying level of WoW Classic and value the experience that overcoming the adversity gave them. Modern Blizzard design seems to be remove all adversity at the expense of all long-term satisfaction. So the next time you hear an older MMO player saying they want old-style MMOs back, what they likely mean is, while they may not remember the less fun process of playing the game, they miss the end feeling of overcoming adversity that the game gave them. But what do you think? Should modern MMOs be designed with fewer features so players have to push through adversity to gain the satisfaction of overcoming it, or should the adversity be removed to increase early game player retention at the cost of long-term satisfaction? Or should self-imposed limitations, such as RuneScape's Iron Man mode, be adopted by the game industry and made available for self-imposed adversity? What's the best design choice here? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you again for watching. Another massive thank you to the supporters on Patreon and Twitch who keep the channel alive. You can support from only £1 a month. Check the video description for links to the Patreon, Twitch, Twitter, and Discord. And as always, have a great day.
Anyways, really good video. I'm glad we watched it. I'd never seen this one before, but the main points that he's making are pretty bang on. I guess the only thing that I would maybe add to it is it's more than just that we're overcoming adversity. It seems like it's not, it just seems like it, they are. Old school MMOs are just much more social in nature. And that in itself it gives more of a reason to actually play it. Like, one of the things that I really enjoy about World of Warcraft, especially vanilla, is logging in to see what everyone's doing and actually going out and accomplishing, goals with, a bunch of people. Logging in, helping someone, go and get some healing trinket that they need or something like that. And even if it's not something for myself, if they get it, then I feel like there's a sense of accomplishment as well. And modern MMOs open up the availability for people to be able to just single player play the game from start to finish, basically. And they bring in things like, group finder and stuff like that teleport you to the dungeon, which to me, that it's a terrible, and you may disagree with this. There's gonna be people that watching the video and they may disagree with me, but it kills the world's how the activity in the world. So it makes it look like the world's dead. That's why I don't like things like that in the game, and why I think so poorly of just added what's the term for anyways. I don't like that they add things like that to the game to just make the game more convenient for people. I think it ruins it overall for the rest of the player base. Quality of life, that's what I'm looking for. Yes, quality of life changes that they make to the game that I think have a negative impact overall. So, anyways, great video by Josh Strife Hayes. If you're watching my video and you've never heard of Josh Strife Hayes, great content creator. All of his links will be down below. Please go to... Why am I showing that I'm not subscribed? I've been subscribed to Josh Strife Hayes for years. So anyways, am I on the right account? I think I'm probably on my other account. Anyways, go to Josh Strife Hayes. Links will be down below. If you want to talk to me about anything MMO related, you can come to my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Alodar. I stream 5-6 days a week. You can catch me there. We talk about a lot of MMOs, a lot of things in general, including why my Vancouver Canucks are terrible. Anyways, we will talk to you guys in the next one. Thank you very much. Take care.